We have breaking news out of Israel this morning. Although everyone is sitting here waiting to find out when or if Israel is going to engage with a ground war after the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, last week, Benjamin Netanyahu releases a statement that actually implies he's looking beyond Hezbollah, beyond Lebanon, and into Iran. He said this just hours ago.
Every day, their puppets are eliminated. Ask Muhammad Dev. Ask Nasrallah. There is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. There's nowhere we will not go to protect our people and protect our country. With every passing moment, the regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. But you know one simple thing. Iran's tyrants don't care about your future, but you do. When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different.
Now, he started off this statement by saying, I have a message for the people of Iran. Now, that is a little more noteworthy than it might otherwise seem, because he gave almost exactly the same speech before he had killed Hassan Nasrallah by saying, I have a message for the Lebanese people. And then we know what he did shortly after that. So I assure you that similarity coming literally a week or so ago is not being lost on anyone in the region. And if anybody is doubting now whether or not Israel is going to go in on the ground in Lebanon, as I've been telling you ever since this current part of the crisis erupted, the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, is trying to eliminate any confusion.
The State of Israel has eliminated Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. He was the murderer of thousands of Israelis and foreign citizens. He was an immediate threat to the life of thousands of Israelis and other citizens. To our enemies, I say, we are strong and determined. To our partners, I would say, our war is your war. And to the people of Lebanon, I say, our war is not with you. It's time to change.
Okay, whoa, hang on. What do you mean your war, our war is your war? No. It is. America has no interest. No other country in the world has any interest in Israel going into attack Hezbollah, to invading sovereign country of Lebanon. There's nobody else that needs this war. So let's just strip away that lie right off the top of the bat. That is attempted at self-justification to justify an expansion of the war. The United States has been saying from the outset that we don't want any expansion of this war. Every time we have tried to tell Israel to hold it back, they continue to spit in our face and do anything that they want anyway. They have, we said earlier, we didn't want the war to expand from its earlier stages. We keep going on. We said, hey, don't advance into Rafah in southern Israel, in southern Gaza Strip. They did it anyway. We said we wanted a ceasefire. We actually had a UN Security Council resolution, which we passed, which by itself was really unusual. They ignored that. We said we want a ceasefire in the Lebanese conflict. They said no to that. We said we want a two-state solution. They said no to that. You see the point here. Every time the U.S. says this is what our interest is, Israel says, I don't care what your interests are. This is what our interests are, and this is what we're going to do. And oh, by the way, you're going to pay for it. We saw just last week that we authorized, on top of everything I just told you and all the absolutely in-your-face repudiations of what the United States says it wants, we gave an additional $8.7 billion. So you can see who's running the show here and who's not. Definitely it's not the administration of the United States, who's supposed to exist to defend our interests. And our interests are not synonymous with Israel. Even though that we have historically supported Israel, that does not mean that we're going to get dragged into a war. And if this expands into Hezbollah, a couple of things. First of all, you guys are high if you think that you're going to be able to just roll in there on the ground and have some sort of big victory. You haven't even finished the ground war that you started a year ago in the Hamas area of Gaza Strip. And now you're going to go into a much, much more difficult ground incursion into Hezbollah, and you think that somehow that's going to work out better? when your army is still pinned down in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank in certain respects? And those areas are not going to stay quiet. I assure you, if the Israeli Defense Forces go into southern Lebanon, those forces are not going to be quiet. They're going to do everything they can to support, to cause even more trouble for the IDF. So that's the first problem here for them, is that it's one thing to launch a massive military strike. I saw one report that said up to 60 missiles were used to take out Hassan Nasrallah, that they said they want to make sure they got him. So they wiped out an entire city block in Beirut, and concerned about who else was harmed in the middle. That's what they wanted to do. But they have the ability to do that because Hezbollah has no air defense, zero. They have no air force. They don't have anything at all that can interdict on the other side. But that's not to say that they don't have capabilities, which we'll touch on in a minute. But we need to understand, though, that they, by all accounts, they are ready to go. This was just a few days before Gallant's comments from their chief of staff talking to their soldiers, telling them what they're need to get ready for.
The goal is very clear: to safely return the residents of the north. To achieve that, we are preparing the process of maneuvering, which means your military boots, your maneuvering boots, will enter enemy territory.
So you have it everywhere. You have from the Minister of Defense, from the Chief of Staff, the ranking general, and then you have, prior to this even, you had Netanyahu talking about how, here's a warning to the people of Lebanon, and now he's given a warning to the people of Iran before he's even gone into Lebanon. I mean, by all accounts, this guy wants nothing but war. Don't be deceived by any words that come out of any Israeli's mouth, any of them. If they say anything to the extent that they want a negotiated settlement, that they want to try diplomacy, those are only words for the American audience in particular, to assuage them from being concerned about what is happening actually on the ground. Right now, as we talk, Israeli troops are massing on the border. Aside from the comments that I just showed you, they are physically moving more and more troops up to the border. They have mobilized brigades. They're moving them further up there. They're thinning out, it appears, some of the combat forces they have in the Gaza Strip to move them up to this area. By all accounts, they are getting ready to go. Now, we've also had overnight some spectacular explosions in Yemen, where Israel is continuing to going after the Houthis and their infrastructure in that war as well. So everywhere you look, so far, Israel is going on with air power and missile power against everybody they don't like. All the constraints have been taken off. And again, we got to call things what they are. And you can see graphic evidence. This is in Yemen, where they had a strike not too dissimilar from this 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think it was now. And this is continuing on, in addition to what the U.S. does to try to shoot down Yemenis missiles and other targets that were coming in from there, and sometimes even the infrastructure. It's been going on literally for months. Yemen has been suffering this kind of attack for a decade. First, it was from Saudi Arabia with our support and encouragement, and now then it's from us directly, and now it's from Israel. And listen, this is hurting Yemen without any question. Though you can't lose that kind of infrastructure and not have some impact, but it's just an impact. These people are just absolutely committed to what they're going to do. And by the way, they have said from the outset, from the time they started doing this, about a month or so after the 10/7 terrorist attack against Israel, that because of the Israeli response and the killing of so many innocent Palestinians, they said they're doing this in in support of the Palestinian people. Hezbollah has said from literally day one that all the stuff that they're doing to the south was against the Israelis for what they were doing in the Gaza Strip against the Palestinian people. They have all said that they would stop their attacks if there's a ceasefire in Gaza, which is America's national interest, which we had a UN Security Council resolution asking for an immediate ceasefire. That would have solved all these problems diplomatically and at least brought an end to the killing, and then would have opened up the window for diplomacy to try and solve the problems. So just a ceasefire doesn't solve a problem, but it gives the space for it. But Israel doesn't want space. Israel doesn't want a negotiated settlement. They don't want a diplomatic solution. Looking at the facts on the ground, Netanyahu wants to solve his Palestinian problems with military power. He wants to solve his Hezbollah problem with military power, and he wants to solve his Israeli problem with military power. And it doesn't matter what the United States wants, doesn't matter what's in our interest. That's what they want. And so they are taking every action in the world to spawn a larger war so that the U.S. has to come to their defense. Because I can tell you, it's almost as predictable as the sun coming up in the morning. If Israel gets into this and all of a sudden the Hezbollah side and or the Iranian side finally unleash this huge barrage of modern missiles that they have, and Israel starts getting pounded, and those images that Gary showed you a minute ago from Yemen, you end up seeing those kinds of images coming out of Israel. What do you think the prospect is that the U.S. is going to say, hey, you got yourself into this, you're going to get it out. We're not fighting for you. I think the chances are zero. I think that Netanyahu has concluded that the chances are zero that we wouldn't do that. And so everything is on track right now to get us sucked into a war that we should never fight. And I don't even know how we would win such a war. Look, even if we don't get sucked in, here's what you need to understand. With all of these extremely elevated numbers of airstrikes that are going in, and the presume at some point fire is going to be coming back, and these interceptor missiles on the Iron Dome system are going to really be tested. Where do you think all that comes from, my friend? That comes from us. That comes from the United States. That's on top of everything. We just offered also another $8 billion to Ukraine for many of these same categories of weapons specified in there. Where are all these interceptor missiles coming from? Where are all these bunker busters coming from? Where are all these 2,000-pound bombs in every other category? Where is all that coming from? American arsenals. And we've already tried to accelerate our capacity to build them, and there's some progress in that, but it's minuscule compared to the need. This is coming out of our war stocks. How long do you think we can afford this? And if we get sucked into it, how much faster will we be depleting our actual war stocks? And this assumes that nothing happens in either the Indo-Pacific with China or in Europe with Russia. Neither of those are safe bets. Do you see what's happening here? We are allowing Israel to suck us into a war that could diminish significantly our ability to actually defend our country, should we need to. We don't have the capacity to continue doing this. And I've talked to you a lot. We have a lot of manpower issues as well. But folks, we should be running from something like this. But instead of running from it, we have guys like Jack Keane saying, let's run to it.
This hands-off approach for Iran is getting us nowhere. But they're not going to do much of anything. They could easily take the Houthis off the board here by taking out Iran's spy ship that's helping them target, taking down their navy that's helping them transport the missiles and the rockets. But we're doing nothing. The Houthis have locked down the Suez Canal, backed by Iran, for months. They have fired at U.S. Navy warships using anti-ship ballistic missiles, Bill. And what are we doing? Nothing. It's appalling.
Wow. Nothing? All that stuff I just showed you, that Gary just showed you there about Yemen burning, all this stuff about assassinating Hassan Nasrallah, and the continued hundreds of airstrikes each night against targets throughout Lebanon. And you call that nothing. And we need to be doing more, he says, oblivious to all the things I just mentioned about how it would cost America. And listen, this talk, I mean, the other thing that's shocking about what he said was it would be easy to take the Houthis off the map. Yeah, really? You think it would be easy? But I mean, you see already, because of these airstrikes, and so far there hasn't been a big barrage coming back from the Hezbollah side. We took out Hassan Nasrallah, which seemed to be off the table before, that you wouldn't take out the head of the other side there. That's been kind of a taboo, that people don't do that. And I'm talking over centuries, the wars, the armies fought, etc. But you didn't take out the leader, because now who do you have to negotiate with or have any kind of possibility of diplomacy, especially in the case like this? We call the Hezbollah a terrorist organization, but in their view, it's a resistance movement, which has a political head, Nasrallah. And we've been engaging in discussions, negotiations, and talks for quite a long time. And aside from the issue of the precedent set here, that now that's a taboo, another one that's been broken by Israel, there is still Hezbollah. Because consider this, that while this has been a devastating attack, by the Israelis against the Hezbollah's leadership. They took out Nasrallah himself, but also a bunch of their top leaders. There is no question that they have been badly gashed. Their communication systems with the pager attacks a week or so ago has significantly impaired their ability to coordinate activities even within the country as they figure out the leadership issue. By every account, there has been serious damage and degradation done to the Hamas, to the Hezbollah side. However, what you haven't done is you haven't destroyed hundreds of thousands of missiles. You haven't killed the somewhere between 50 or in some other cases, some other reports, 100,000 Hezbollah fighters who are in hardened positions in many parts of the southern part of Lebanon. You haven't gotten rid of those. And you also haven't wiped out all their leadership. And now then the deputy, I think they call him Secretary General Qasem, has this message to tell anyone who's interested.
We are ready. If the Israelis want to enter on a ground offensive, the forces of resistance are ready in order to begin a ground confrontation and a ground battle. We have prepared and we are ready. And with God's support and with confidence in God, we are confident that the Israeli enemy will not achieve its objectives and we will be victorious after this battle.
Okay, so now on the one hand, you can say, well, of course, what else is he going to say? He's not going to quit. Well, the point being that they're not going to roll over. So if anybody thought that by taking out all of their leadership and attacking these targets throughout Hezbollah in Lebanon, that's going to knock them out of the war, that was a fantasy from the beginning. I doubt that Israel had that fantasy. I think that they've always known that they were going to harm them and degrade them, but they knew that they had to go in on the ground because their stated objective, let me remind you, about a week or 10 days ago, was to push back all of Hezbollah to the Litani River, which is basically out of rocket range of Israel, so that their people could move back into safety. That's been their objective. You can't accomplish that unless they literally lay down their arms and quit, which ironically, perversely, is what Netanyahu has called for. He just said, I'm basically an uncontested surrender. If you just give up everything and stop, then everything will be fine. But I mean, literally, that's their very cause of existing. This is why they live, to resist, because they've been having this for nearly decades. And the idea that you can kill a few people and that the rest of them are going to quit is just absurd. They're not going to. Israel's not confused on that point. Some in the West have been. It's like if you take these people out, then all of a sudden maybe they'll quit. But Israel has known that was going to degrade them, but now then they're ready to go in on the ground. And so Qasem also addressed that issue of the leadership problem in saying that, like we've been talking about before, this is how these organizations are actually manned and created. They understand that they're targets so that their leadership is going to get hit, and they always have backup plans and other people to fill the gap, as he said here.
When it comes to our ability, we do whatever is there in order to replace leaders by leaders. And Israel didn't manage at all to hit our military capabilities. What is being said by the media that they have targeted and hit our military capabilities, this is a dream. They are dreaming. They will never be able to achieve that. We are strong enough, and we will turn the Israelis mad, because they will never ever be able to reach and hit and hurt our military capabilities. We are ready with the help of Allah Almighty, and we will continue our path when it comes to the human and military powers.
Okay, it's unclear yet whether Naim Qasem is going to be the formal head, but he is the acting head right now. And you have to think about what this looks like from his perspective. So one thing about Hassan Nasrallah is that, especially over the last decade or so, he's been a very pragmatic and risk-averse leader. He's made lots of flashy statements, but when you're talking about what his actions are, they were taking even very measured actions here about what they were going to do in response to everything since October the 8th. and they have been careful not to escalate too far because they constantly say they don't want a wider war, and their actions showed it. They wanted to put enough pressure on Israel, they thought, to make them have be willing to have a ceasefire, but they did not want to go too far. And by all accounts, at least publicly said, they have somewhere around 150,000 missiles and rockets, many of which are quite modern and can penetrate Israeli air defense systems. They have not used any of those to date, except for one single shot to Tel Aviv, which I think was probably more of a recon shot than anything else to see how the Israeli defense systems work. And if they have more of those and they want to use them, they now have a better idea of how to make them more effective. But here's the thing. Hassan Nasrallah was leading, and he was always careful. He didn't want to get into an escalated situation here, so he held back the majority of his weapons there. Now he's dead. So what do you think that the guy who's coming after him is going to think? Is he going to be more pragmatic and calculated, or is he going to say, man, Nasrallah had this arsenal before and every intention of what Israel was going to do, and he never used them, and now he's gone. So the next guy in line is probably going to say, I'm not going to get into this failed issue of use it or lose it. And so they didn't use it, and now they've lost it, Hassan Nasrallah. The next guy is likely to be much less restrained and more willing to take risks because they see there's no value in just talking. There's no value in trying to be measured. So now then there's the risk. And again, this assumes that Hezbollah actually has this arsenal that has been attributed to them. And I can't say that myself with any conviction because all I've seen is reports myself. I'm obviously not on the ground. I don't have any sources inside Hezbollah. So who knows? It may turn out that they don't ever use them because they've never had them anyway. I doubt that's the case because there's every reason and every means for them to have gotten them and assessed them, pulled them together over the years. But if they do, then they're almost certainly going to use them. But even if they didn't have that, let me talk about the military difficulty for Israel on the ground here. You can airstrike stuff all day long, but you can't root people out unless you go in on the ground. And it is extremely difficult to be able to root out somebody who's had prepared deficiencies. Look at the Russians over all these years. I'm going back to 2014. A lot of these defensive positions that they're hitting right now in the Pokrovsk area, for example, before that in Bakhmut, Avdiivka, several Donetsk, Lysychansk, etc. All those had been built since the 2014 time. And so it was really hard for Russia to go through. And you see how long it's taken them. Now over 2.5 years, and they're only now getting to the end of those prepared positions here. This is probably going to be something the same level of difficulty. I don't know that Israel has, 2.5 years of time to be able to fight a slow and grinding and methodical battle like this to try to move through them. But the difficulty is quite serious. Now, what's going to come next? So let's just say that Israel moves in there, and they do, and it could come literally any day now. And all of a sudden, they start getting bogged down here. And then Hezbollah shows that they have this arsenal, and they start using them when the Israeli forces are pinned down. Now, you see that they don't have enough troops to fight all of these wars simultaneously, and especially if they try to advance and escalate into Iran. And I assure you, the Iranian leaders right now are terrified. No doubt they're probably going into their deepest underground bunkers because they see that Israel has not concerned themselves about any previous taboos about how international relations are done, and they're willing to kill anyone. So they're taking this very, very seriously because it's now an existential threat for the Iranian regime. That message I showed you at the top was nothing less than a plea to the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow their government. Because he kept saying, after you're free and your government doesn't care for you, et cetera. I mean, it's a ham-fisted situation, but he certainly is saying that because there's no question that there are people in Iran that would love to do that. But I think the chances of that happening are incredibly remote. And if Israel attacks into Iran in any capacity, many of those who were kind of on the fence and don't like the regime will probably have a rally around the flag situation. And certainly those that are under their control will definitely do so. So this could just expand greatly. Doug McGregor just released a statement where he's warning about how serious this is.
People need to keep their eyes on Mr. Netanyahu's threat to invade and destroy southern Lebanon, because that could be the trigger for dramatic events in the entire region. That could bring on a major war, not just with Iran, but with other states. Need to watch Egypt. General Sisi is hanging by a thread. He's extremely unpopular with his population, who see him as an Israeli and U.S. puppet. The same thing is true for King Abdullah in Jordan. His entire government resigned 24 hours ago and walked away from him. I don't think that Abdullah or Sisi are going to survive this crisis and conflict.
And sort of to underscore that, there was a statement released by 57 Arab countries I guess also hours ago. Watch, this is a Jordanian foreign minister that's delivering these remarks, but look at the frustration and the growing anger in his voice. Watch this.
Sir came here today and said that Israel is surrounded by those who want to destroy it, an enemy. We're here, members of a Muslim Arab committee mandated by 57 Arab and Muslim countries. And I can tell you here, very unequivocally, all of us are willing to, right now, guarantee the security of Israel in the context of Israel ending the occupation and allowing for the emergence of a Palestinian state, independent state, along the efforts that we all agree. He is creating that danger because he simply does not want the two-state solution. And if he does not want the two-state solution, can you ask Israeli officials, what is their end game? Other than just wars and wars and wars. I'm telling you, all of us in the Arab world here, we want a peace in which Israel lives in peace and security, accepted, normalized with all Arab countries in the context of ending the occupation, withdrawing from Arab territory, allowing for the emergence of an independent sovereign Palestinian state on June 4, 1967, lies with occupied Jerusalem as capital. That is our narrative. And we will guarantee Israel's security in that context.
Okay, Gary, that's good enough right there. Listen, that just underscores the fact, what I've been telling you from the beginning. There is a diplomatic solution to this, if only Israel was willing to have any negotiations and any kind of diplomacy. They have rejected every possible means of negotiated settlement from us. From the United States. We have literally been begging them and pleading with them to have ceasefires in Gaza and up in now recently in Lebanon. And they have rejected everything we've done and totally spit in our face on especially on the assassination of Nasrallah, because just like when Israel assassinated the chief negotiator for Hamas when he was in Tehran, they then now assassinated this leader here. Do you see this? Every way that you can possibly imagine, Israel is destroying any chance for a negotiated settlement or any diplomacy short of abject and total surrender of all of their enemies. They are seeking a military confrontation, and they're trying to drag you and your country into it. And I, for one, am ready to say, oh, hell no. I am not going to, I do not want our country to just be played like a children's toy and so easily manipulated into getting sucked into a war. Because so far, Israel, all these things they've done have been through airstrikes, and that hasn't involved them getting their armies bogged down anywhere. And even the bog down that they have in the Gaza Strip is something that literally can be sustained indefinitely, because the level of resistance and the amount of troops that they would need to maintain that could be handled a long time. Not this one. You go into Lebanon and everything could change on the ground. Everything could turn in a negative way. And then we would be faced with the specter of saying either, yes, we're going to allow Israel to burn from all these rockets that are coming in, and possibly if Iran gets into it, or us getting involved in the war. And I think that's the dangerous place that we're on the very brink of right now. And if I were the leader of the United States, I would say that. And I would unequivocally say, first of all, privately, and if that didn't have any results, I'd say so publicly, that it is not in the interest of the United States to get drawn into a war. We have nothing to gain and everything to lose from fighting a war, no matter the source of that conflict, short of a Pearl Harbor style attack against us, which won't happen. Anything less than that, any kind of a war of choice to rescue Israel, I would not do, because I would tell the Israelis, if you do this, you will be on your own, because All of these Arab League people are screaming at you. America is screaming at you. There is a negotiated settlement where you can live in peace as long as everybody has a chance to live in peace. It would be hard. It would be difficult. It would take generations to actually accomplish, but it is at least something worth pursuing, as opposed to this, which has, in my view, virtually no chance to end well for Israel. This fantasy, this myth that some, whether it's Jack Keeney in the United States and his ilk, or those senior leaders in Israel who have this fantasy of thinking that with strong enough military and with enough killing power, they can kill their way to victory. They're just writing the epithet for their own, regime. Because I think in time, we just can't endure this. And I've told you there are very practical reasons earlier in this episode how we don't have the equipment, the ammunition, or the manpower to get sucked into another war, especially with all the other things on the global stage right now. We should be running from this and screaming in the face, if necessary, of our Israeli friends, as Netanyahu once so eloquently put it in reverse, and say, we will tell you no. He's willing to tell us no. When is it ever that the powerful United States is ever going to stand up and tell them no? Because all that I ever hear about is how we shape events and we do this and we're the most powerful nation in the history of the world and all this nonsense. Those are all empty, humiliating words when you see the action is the exact opposite. Is that we're not running anything. We're not shaping anything. We're just a patsy walking along, letting this much smaller Israel call all the shots, and we subserviently give into it. Now, it's one thing if it's a political issue and we can roll our eyes and say this is not bad, and the Israeli owns our politicians and whatever. That's one thing. But when it's physically on the ground and you're talking war and peace, which could kill Americans, they could draw us into a conflict where Americans would die for a war they should never fight. In a war that's not for American national security interest. It's not. And it has every possibility beyond that, I won't go into it now, of escalating even beyond that. As there's all kinds of other parties with an interest in the region, and God only knows where it could go. We don't need to find out. But that's where it is right now. And we're going to keep on top of this because, like I said, the troops are massing up on the border. These things could change dramatically in a minute. So we're going to stay on top of this for you, and we'll continue to bring it to you as it happens. We're going to come back later this afternoon with Larry Johnson. We're going to be talking about one of those other issues in the geopolitical landscape, and that is with the Russia-Ukraine war, and that's got its own set of troubles that we need to talk about. Larry will talk about that at 2 p.m. this afternoon. So thank you very much for watching with us today. Be sure and like and subscribe. Really do appreciate it when you guys do that. It helps us a lot to expand our message because we are unintimidated and unafraid to bring you the truth no matter what it is. Thanks, and we'll see you this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.